As you know, every Wednesday at noon, we're here. Next Wednesday, we have a teaching chat. We can talk about all those things that we're just kind of dealing with in kind of a more open forum. I'll have some things that I want to kind of crowdsource some information about, but I'm really excited to see what you have for us too. Today, we're very excited to have Dr. Ellie Sayre from physics talk to us about undergraduate research mentoring and undergraduate mentoring in general, I suspect. This is something a lot of us do and a lot of us are doing, as Ellie said in a promotional video, the way that we did it. We based on our own experiences, and there might be a little bit more systematic way to go about this. So I am very excited to learn today with Dr. Sayre. So Dr. Sayre, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. I am so excited to be here today. And the subject of undergraduate research mentoring is huge. And like huge, like we could teach a 3-credit grad course on how to do this well. Wouldn't that be fun? So we're not going to do everything in 1 hour. That is too many things. Instead, today, we are going to focus on picking apart and playing with one substantive interaction and how that helps us think about research mentoring. I'm going to share screen, which means I'm not going to be able to see the chat really well. I encourage you to use the chat anyways. I think it's a great channel of conversation. But also, if you have questions for me, you have to say them out loud or I won't know they're happening.
I can also manage the chat for you, Ellie, as we're kind of going through, because I do some people are not able to kind of use their voices. So I'll monitor that for you.
Fabulous. All right. And the other thing that I want to say here is that I'm going to put a PDF in the chat for all of you to download. I want you to download it, but do not read it. We'll read it later. I know it's super appealing to want to read it now, but wait, just wait a little bit of time. Okay, so are we ready to do the screen share? All right. This, yes. And that. Oh, slides. You got them? All right, so as we start this formal program, I want to do a land acknowledgement here. Kansas State stands on the treaty lands of the Kaw Nation. There are 4 federally recognized tribes in Kansas: the Kickapoo, the Prairie Brown Potawatomi, the Sac and Fox, and the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska. I acknowledge K-State's commitment to the future success of Indigenous cultures and people through our university mission of education, service, and outreach. This is important. Today, we're going to talk about 3 things. Good mentoring is important. Effective communication is key to good mentoring. And we're going to do a case study. And I promise you, we're not going to do everything about good mentoring, and we're not. We're just going to talk about this one tiny slice. But you want to do more later? We'll do more later, just not in this meeting. Another thing I want to talk about here, as we are getting prepared to do this, is having hard conversations is hard. Talking about job issues, collaboration, credit for work, talking about what should we be doing, how should this have worked. It's uncomfortable, but it's incredibly necessary. As faculty, as advisors, we are not trained in how to mentor students. So we're going to lean on our own experiences. And for some of us, they were great experiences. And for others of us, they were traumatic experiences. And for most of us, there's a mix of good and bad. Talking about this can make us feel vulnerable, but getting community feedback from other people in our community, other faculty, can be incredibly valuable. So we're over Zoom. If you need to take a break, that's okay. We're going to use the oops, ouch, protocol, which is when someone says something, you're like, ouch, that thing you said hurts me or offends me because of this. And then they say, oops, I'm sorry. Can we talk about how? And this is an opening of a dialogue. You can also think like, I think that might have been offensive, but I'm not sure how. Response is still the same. Oops, I'm sorry. Can we talk about it? We don't have to talk about it in the moment. but it's good to acknowledge the hurt that we cause. So if we had our entire grad class, we would totally spend a lot of time practicing this, but we're not going to have a lot of time to practice anything today. I want to talk about mentors as important. And this is astrophysics data. Graduate students who give their advisor the worst rating are 10 times more likely to consider leaving astronomy than people who give their advisor the best rating. 10 times more likely to consider leaving the field. So here's my graduate advisor, Michael. But it turns out, and I give Michael a good rating. Michael and I have a good relationship here. But it turns out that people whose advisor is their only mentor are more likely to consider leaving graduate school. And what that means is it's not enough to have one. You need a constellation of mentorship. And so here are some other people that are my mentors. And I want to point out that while Michael is my graduate mentor, all of these other people are people that became my mentors after my graduate career. Mentorship is not a thing that you're done with when you have PhD, or menteeship is not a thing that you're done with when you have PhD in hand. And being a mentor, being a mentee, and being in co-mentoring relationships is an important part of being a professional anything, but especially being a professional academic. Questions so far? All right, I have a quiz for you. This is Angela Johnson's work. She is a fabulous researcher that I work with at St. Mary's College of Maryland. She did interviews with professional women of color in STEM. So these are like practicing scientists and engineers, asking them to reflect on their undergraduate careers. So what are the 3 most common undergraduate settings or activities where they most commonly cited as causing intense feelings of non-belongingness? And non-belongingness is the biggest predictor of people leaving the field. Feeling like you don't belong is the biggest predictor for leaving. So it's really important for us as faculty to think about what are the settings or activities that we create that would make our students feel like they do not belong. So what are they? Think to yourself, have some nominees in your mind. Here we go. Large lecture classes, asking and answering questions in class, particularly in large lecture classes, and undergraduate research experiences. And when I saw this data the first time, I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. Large lecture classes, very isolating, very alienating. Asking and answering questions in class, yeah, that's a real opportunity to be ridiculed or exposed for not knowing stuff. Undergraduate research experiences, well, that's totally different. We have this narrative around undergraduate research that this is students' opportunity to really deeply engage with what it means to be a professional in this field. It's an opportunity to work really closely with a faculty member and maybe some other students around a really deep problem that nobody in the world knows the answer to. Why are undergraduate research experiences, which we think of as being so important and so powerful, why are they causing intense feelings of non-belonging? This troubles me. It turns out there's data on this. So, I read a little bit further in Angela's paper. And I'm going to call this the research robot mentality. And it goes like this. As a research mentor, I want to talk about my research with my students. That's awesome. But if I only want to talk about research with my students, if I want to treat them like research robots, junior trainee robots, and treat myself like a research robot, then I'm denying them the opportunity to do something that they find deeply important. Students want to connect on a personal level to their research mentors. They are trying on possible future identities. Is this the kind of person I want to be? And by operating in research robot mode, you're not letting them do that. And it's sort of more than that. And the data here are particularly women of color, and they don't want their professors to help them out of a generalized sense of duty, like I need to make things better in general. They want their professors, their research mentors, to help them because the research mentors genuinely wish the best for their mentees as humans and as individuals. In conclusion, don't be a research robot. So what does this look like, this relationship building? And what are some of the key parts? Well, I want to argue that one of the key parts of being a really excellent research mentor is about effective communication. Effective communication is key to good mentoring. It's super important. But now I have a question for you. Why could that be true? Think to yourself. All right, popcorn style. Why is effective communication key to good mentoring?
Make sure you're on the same page with your priorities.
Yeah. Setting good expectations. What else?
This might be using the word in the explanation, but it prevents miscommunication, which can be uncomfortable or not be on the same page.
Yeah, all right. Being effective is the opposite of miscommunicating. I agree.
Once we know what the expectations are, we're also communicating how well we are meeting or falling short of those expectations.
Yeah, so there are elements of of effective communication. It's both setting expectations and then checking in with progress.
Effective communication is also collaborative. It's not top down.
Yeah, it's a bidirectional or a multi-directional thing if you have more than two humans involved. What else?
Someone in the chat said that relationships are based on communication and that communication also takes time, which shows that you care.
Ooh, what a beautiful idea.
Another person said making sure both parties are using the same language for things and are seeking to understand each other.
Also true. Wow, all right, I'll take one more.
Communication is an important part of feedback, both for them and for me. So I give them good feedback on their work, right? But they also give me feedback about how I am mentoring them. And they can say, oh, you helped me a little too much. I would like to do this part by myself. Or, oh, I can't do this by myself. I would like more help, please.
Yeah.
And extending that point in the chat, someone said very similar to Tiffany, if I feel they can understand me, I'm more comfortable thinking in front of them.
Ooh, and that's a bidirectional thing. Mentors do thinking in front of mentees and mentees do thinking in front of mentors. So a lot of effective communication is about modeling thought processes and sharing them for other people to know as well.
To take it a different direction just because I do, and say that mentoring is also about understanding ourselves.
Ooh, say more about that.
Well, what I mean is that when we talk out loud to our students, we hear our own thought pattern and we hear that we don't think about ourselves, but in being the mentor, we think it's important to say. And it gives us a chance to evaluate whether this is really true in our own belief system or whether it's not. Because too often we take our guide from the mentoring that we got ourselves, and they become internalized. So in that mentoring, sort of the collaborative process, we learn something about ourselves. And if we're paying attention, we pick it up.
Yeah, you are touching on a thing which is really close to my heart. That's about people who speak to learn, and people like words have to come out as a process of your learning, or people who need to think first before they're ready to speak.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So these are all fabulous ideas. You guys know so much about this already. I don't know why I'm giving this seminar. You know these things already. The thing I want to talk about now is how can we collaborate well? And you're going to go into breakout groups. You're going to role play the scenario, and I'll show you it in a sec, but also you have this PDF, which you're allowed to open now. And in your role play, I want one person to take each character. So there are 3 characters here. They are Nick, Ed, and Leah. And I want you to each play this character. Talk to the other characters about what you want in this scenario and come to agreement about what to do next. And then after you do that role play, we'll come back together to do a little bit of reflection. And the kinds of things we're going to talk about in our reflection is how you felt as those characters, and what are the possible solutions here, and what could these characters have done to avoid this as a situation. But in your breakout groups, I want you to do the role play. And if you find that you are finishing up your role play really fast, then I want you to rotate roles so that different people play different characters, and try it again in a totally new way. The thing that I love about role plays is it gives us the opportunity to try on new ways of thinking and new ways of being in a way that has very few consequences, but does have like imaginary world consequences. So it's a good way for us to try out, what would happen if this were to occur? Well, what if we believed in this other way? The other thing that I really love about role play is that having a particular scenario in front of us gives us an opportunity to ground our discussion in that scenario rather than to speak in like big, broad generalities. So you're going to role play this. Everybody take a role. If you're in a group of 4, the 4th person is there to monitor everybody's emotional response. You're going to spend 10 minutes on role play, which is enough time to definitely do it 1 time and possibly do it 2 times. And to really explore where these characters are at. So before I send you away into your groups, I want you to each quietly by yourself read the scenario, and then I will take questions about what you're supposed to do with it and what is going on in the scenario. I will not take questions about what's the answer to this problem. Got it? All right, quiet reading time. All right, questions from everyone around what's going on here, or what you're supposed to be doing next.
I had a question, and this is just terminology, but what does a preliminary mean in this case?
Yeah, so preliminary would be like this is early data, or this is an early analysis, but it's not a ton of data, or it's not a really huge and robust thing. Oftentimes we publish preliminary papers in conference proceedings, and then like a year or two later, we're like, oh, and now we really know for certain, and it becomes a journal paper.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, more questions.
I do have one. In the case of Ed, being in charge of selecting data, outside of the coding, does he have any other guideline for selection?
Yes, but feel free to make up details that seem reasonable to you.
Okay.
Yeah, so in general in this role play, there's a lot of details that could be true about Nick, Ed, and Leah, like who are they as people, and what field are they in, and what exactly is this research project? And those are, it is perfectly okay if there's a detail you need here to make up something in your group. Be inventive, that's awesome. More questions? All right, I'm gonna send you to your breakout rooms. And hello, everybody, welcome back. I noticed that when you are waiting to the very end of that time, it must mean that you're having fabulous conversations. So, hooray. I want to talk about this case study that you guys just spent some time role-playing through. And the first person I want to hear from is Leah. So if you played Leah, how did you feel in this interaction?
Well, at first, I was not happy. I was very uncomfortable because I was getting ganged up on both sides. And yet I didn't know why Ed was upset, why he was angry. But later, as we talked it through, I became very confident that the work that I had done in the research area was in fact the most current information. And so I changed from sort of looking at the context of what could be the context to a more comfortable position.
Yeah, all right. Another Leah, how did you feel?
As Leah, I think my primary emotion was frustration, but I think everyone was kind of feeling that. But at the same time, I was glad I found the paper. And ultimately, I think it'll help us build a stronger paper for whatever we're going to end up publishing as well. And we should incorporate it in our work.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge that this is actually like a legit frustrating situation for everybody to be in. Another Leah, how did you feel?
My gut reaction was to start off defensive. I mean, and defensiveness is usually counterproductive, but you know, insofar as we were in the safety of a role play, I think we worked it out.
Awesome. Just because it's not usually productive doesn't mean that it's not a valid and real thing that happens. So thank you for coming from that place. Let's talk about Nick. Nick, you are Leah and Ed's supervisor. How did you feel in this interaction?
I'll say that one of the things that I felt in my interaction as Nick and my group was that it's my job to mitigate the frustration and to provide context. So what does this mean? And there's a lot of information that we had to talk about is this paper preliminary? Did it ever get published? What does this suggest about the veracity of our findings? Should we do anything differently? And also provide some opportunity for me to talk about the peer review process and science in general, and how sometimes we mess up and we got to move on from that. But the emotion starts the conversation.
Yeah. So it sounds like that Nick, you jumped right towards how do we solve this as a problem? How is this a teachable moment?
Because Nick needs the publication. Nick's an assistant professor, so
he totally does. How did you feel as Nick? What were the emotions going through your head as Nick?
There was some guilt that I would have let the situation happen on my watch, that my student would not have been mentored well enough to find the paper in the first place. Also some frustration that in thinking about literature searches, we miss stuff all the time. So kind of, those kind of frustrations about the field, but then also saying, hey, I got to fix this. I'm the person in charge. I know I'm going to come in, I got to get everybody back working on the same page or this project doesn't happen.
Yeah. All right. Another Nick, how did you feel in this situation?
Talking strictly about like initial feelings, initially I was disappointed in the Leah character because she's a grad student and theoretically she's done a lot of literature reviews in her life, right? And is familiar-ish with the field. But then I tried to mitigate that by like getting down to business and being like, what do we do now? How can we fix it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about how this could be field dependent too. So in my field, preliminary data, if it's not published, it's almost like zero because it's not supposed to be found. It's not like official yet because it hasn't been peer reviewed. But also in my field, we do multiple studies. So even if one of your studies is just replicating what someone else did, this could be like the beginning study and you could end up developing as a group other studies that build off of that work. So it wouldn't be like this is one and done and it's over. It's like, hey, this is something else we could do. Another idea I had, and this is something I would do, is maybe even contact the people who did that research and find out why is this still preliminary? Did they have findings that were weird? Is the context different from what we're studying? Is this potentially a co-authorship in the future if this is something they're still interested in working on, but they haven't been able to make progress? And those are all lessons that both is it Ed and Leah could learn from by kind of working together and then finding out that research is something that's collaborative. It's not something like one lab is pitted against another lab to see who can publish it first.
Sorry, my cat has decided to join this Zoom call. So if I disappear, it's because she has very strong opinions. Yeah, fabulous. All right, so Nick, it looks like you are also pivoting to this as a learning opportunity and an opportunity to think about what is collaboration and what does it mean to do this work. I would like to hear from some Eds. Ed, how did you feel? You're an undergrad and here's your advisor and a graduate student kind of fighting. What's going on here? Ed, how do you feel?
So for me, it was very awkward. So I'm a graduate teaching assistant. So, and I could like really feel myself in that space. I didn't know what to say. So I didn't like take part in the conversation because this graduate student is someone that I'm supposed to look up to. And so if someone else is querying the work that they have done, it sort of like speaks to the quality of things that they are able to do. And it really leaves you pretty confused in that space.
Yeah, it's hard for Ed to kind of find his voice here. Another Ed.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of echo what Adelaide had just kind of talked about, it was an uncomfortable experience, and I didn't feel like I really had a lot of say in how we could move forward with this idea. Again, as the graduate student, that's someone you look up to and work closely with, but ultimately the assistant professor kind of has control over how the lab operates. So it was kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Thinking a little bit frustrated. Is it like, so did I do all this work for nothing, or is something gonna come out of this?
Yeah, so there's a sense of like, oh my God, I don't think I can talk now, but also has my entire research experience to date just been invalidated? All right.
I want to go back to something our group said that I think set context for us. For instance, Nick made a comment about why he might have been angry at Leah because perhaps this is a habit of hers to not be one who fulfills her obligations or has messed up more than once or twice on one of her research projects, which changes how the dynamics of that conversation and how Ed might respond, which I thought sort of threw me for a loop as Leah's like, oh, wait a minute, let me think about that. How would I respond? So I think that part of it just depends on us making up what the context was to those personalities and the history that each one of the characters might have had with that person.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the resolutions here, because there were 5 groups and some of you might have done this twice. So how did you resolve this problem? And I want to emphasize that there's not one good answer. There are a lot of really bad answers, but there are also a lot of good answers. So in your groups, how did you resolve this problem?
Salvage the project. Let's
Yeah.
get the information that we can. Let's move forward. Let's make it as good as we can be. We got to work together toward that goal.
I think using the experience as a learning opportunity and a teaching moment. So this was something that, like this, I mentioned in my group, like this brought me back to a moment when I was in grad school and doing some research and I lost a chunk of my data because I didn't save it properly. And I was like devastated about it. And my advisor told me a joke about the devil and Jesus getting in a typing competition, and that Jesus was typing really slowly and the devil was typing really fast, but then the power went out and Jesus won because only Jesus saves. And like in that moment, like having my advisor just be like, you know, we're all human, and recognizing my humanity and realizing that I was already beating myself up quite a bit for this was an opportunity for me to see that, like, okay, this is frustrating. This is not the end of the world. I will get through this. I feel like that was perhaps the best way that he could respond in that moment. And you know, he's like, now you have a much better appreciation for why we back up data in many different places. And sure enough, yes, I now back up data in multiple places, in multiple formats. So it really was an opportunity to kind of learn from it. And so I think in this situation, you know, taking the student, going back, is there a way that they could have found this earlier? You know, what can we learn from this, and how, like Don said, how can we salvage this project and move forward?
I want to pull out another element in your story, because yes, absolutely. How do we salvage and move forward? But a thing that your advisor did was attend to you as a human being. It's not just a teachable moment for how does research work. It's a moment to acknowledge that you as a human are upset, and that it's not just that research is a kind of messy process, but research is a messy process done by humans, and we need to attend to each other as humans. And that really came out in your story about like what matters here. And so I started asking you questions about, how did you feel as Leah? How did you feel as Nick? And Don was like, well, as Nick, I just solved things. And I redirected him to know, how did you feel as Nick? Because I think oftentimes as researchers, as advisors, we want to take on this research robot persona where we just want to fix it. And we do, we want to fix it, and fixing it is good. And Nick's an assistant professor and he needs those papers. But also to take a moment and acknowledge that this is a frustrating situation, that everybody is upset here, and that maybe Leah's kicking herself for not finding it, but also kind of pissy at everybody else for being so mean to her. This is only a preliminary paper. And there's some weirdness in how Ed is in this situation, but it's awkward for him too. And to take that moment and acknowledge the humanity of what we're doing and the emotions of how we're doing this is a major key part of good and effective mentoring. And it's a way that we push out of being research robots and into building effective mentoring relationships. So I have one more question for you. In your interactions, did Nick attend to the dynamic between Ed and Leah?
Our group started to talk about that a little bit, and we also talked about some of the potential power dynamics at play. You've got an undergrad student, a graduate student, and an assistant professor, and you also have potentially you have gender dynamics at play here that can create some imbalance. And ultimately what we thought Leah would do, because Nick was angry, which closes off communication, he wasn't just disappointed, he was angry. That if we had been Leah, we probably would have wanted another mentor to go to and say, here's the situation. I'm not sure I can talk to Nick. I need somebody else to help me out who is, you know, that there's that weird power dynamic isn't necessarily there.
Yeah, yeah. As a mentor, one of the things that was hardest for me to learn was that I had to pay attention to how my mentees were operating with each other. And as a mentor, I had to push all of my mentees to develop other mentors as well. And both of those things are super hard and super important in helping students be successful.
I think Slava answered the question on Don in the chat, but even though I think if I had cried, I would have gotten more empathy. Okay. Let's just say it that way, as Leah. But he tried, he got there a little bit.
Well, I would say, to defend myself here, in the thing, it said Nick was mad, right? So kind of having to play that role. In this situation, I probably wouldn't have been mad. I mean, this happens all the time in research. So playing the role as Nick, I was your robot. Don wouldn't have been the robot. That's because Don wouldn't have been mad in that situation. That's not a situation where he can get mad about. And but believe me, I get mad about lots of things, but missing a review, that's not something I get mad about.
Yeah.
This was one thing that I had trouble with reading the situation, is that I was just kind of like, well, what, like, why? Like, these kind of things happen. And so like, just like, this is where you show like, okay, so this happened. This isn't ideal. Like, we're all maybe kind of annoyed by it, but like mad? Like, it just seemed very strange to me.
So Jeremy makes a point that actually what it says is upset. And there are lots of ways to.
But upset at her, right?
Yep. Upset at her. Yeah, I agree. As we sort of close off this role play, I want to like, FYI, this really happened. I changed the names and some of the details, but this is like real stuff. And so I can tell you what happened after. They had a bunch of conversations. They did in fact contact the other lab from Seattle. It turned out that the other lab had not followed up on that data because they ran out of money. And it turned into a really fruitful collaboration between these two labs. And a journal paper came out a few years later. So like a great solution. Leah went on and did get a PhD, and Ed applied to graduate school in this field, but then we lost track of him. So
I think one thing I was thinking when we were going through the situation, what my advisor did was especially with Ed being an undergrad, articulating what you're doing, like every step of the process. So even if Leah had been responsible for the literature review, explaining to Ed and Nick, like in a meeting, this is how I'm going to approach the lit review. So Ed learns how to do a lit review in that field, because I know when I started in the field I'm in, even though I had master's degrees and had done this in other fields, I needed to learn what are the journals I focus on first in my lit review. How do I figure out my search terms and that sort of thing? And how do I document that? So later when we go to write the methods, I make sure I've written that, especially if it's something like where you're doing a meta-analysis where you actually need that and you need to document exactly what you did in your process.
Yeah, yeah, definitely part of the learning experience. A thing that I want to pull out that has happened when I've done this with other people, but not with this group, is that when I do this with graduate students, they almost always tell me, how do we know that Leah knows how to do a lit review? We weren't taught how to do that. So yeah, think on that. We are running low on time. So I would like to invite closing ideas or closing comments from all of you.
Well, I'm going to start by saying, to follow up on your last statement, is that in architecture, whether undergraduate until you move into graduate school, there's very little opportunity to do research. We don't. So when you talk about our fifth year students who are now, they're graduate students at third year, but they do research, they do a report, they can do a thesis, that's all brand new to them. And as faculty, sometimes we get a little upset, use that term, because they don't remember or know how, recall things that they were taught in a research methods course, or didn't actually pay attention in the research methods course to do it. So then it becomes our job to refresh and keep them moving. And so this whole idea of whether you forgot what you're supposed to do puts a lot of burden on our faculty when we expect them to have remembered or learned that in another class and apply it. Those of you in fields where that is the natural progression, to teach it earlier in the curriculum or to do it multiple times, may feel a little different than students that we have that actually, some of them don't actually do a research report. They do a project, a design project, and come out of it with a master's degree. So the expectations are a little different. And yet we hope that when you look at that degree, that they've had those experiences, but it's not a level playing field. Let me just end that way.
Yeah, I wanted to comment similar to what Clarissa put in the chat, that I think that so often with just undergraduate teaching in general, there's this like, okay, now go research. And like, it's like, okay, now you're going to research this project. Now go, be free. And like the students are just kind of like, and I remember having that experience as an undergrad, just going like, I don't even know where to start. And a lot of our students just start with like a Google search, because how else are you going to find information, you know? And so like pointing them to specific resources, like these are good journals you want to look at, or here's how you might want to start a search, you know, using the library, giving them some kind of direction as to like how to approach research in a project, whether they be undergraduate or graduate students, I think is important, especially because different disciplines can be different and there's just so many factors, and it helps to create a more level playing field. Then you don't have the students who are coming from a privileged background getting the advantage, because you're giving the information to everybody.
I'll give you an example here. You mentioned the library. Ellen, Ertan, and Thomas, both out of the library, are assigned to our college. And you can ask your students to seek them out to help you with your lit search. Now, the question is, do they pursue that? And you can tell when they don't, because they don't know how to start. and 2-3 weeks go by and they still haven't done anything of substance. So I do recommend that we make our students more aware of those librarians who are there to help our students search, to do research. When we do competitions, design competitions, my student group is sent to our library, and our librarian will look up history for them, examples of things that will help them understand the context in which they're designing. So having that resource is something other than the internet that we really should employ them to engage, because it's there and their job is to get our students going and to help them with that. And I think that once they find out that there is a resource and that it can be fun to do that work, then they're on their way. They're on their way. So just a tip.
On that note, I am mindful of the time. This has been a wonderful and vibrant discussion. There's another separate and also awesome discussion going on in the chat. It sounds like there's a lot of desire to continue this as a conversation and also to move into additional future sessions around research mentoring and supporting students in PD. Awesome, super fun times. I am down for that, but not right now because I got another meeting to go to. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ellie. We really appreciate your time today. Everyone have a great rest of your week. Next Wednesday at noon, teaching chat. We'll see you there. Thank you, everyone.